Welcome to Government Contracting Weekly, sponsored by AOC Key Solutions Incorporated. Government Contracting Weekly is the only television program devoted exclusively to the competitive and dynamic world of government contracting. A world where coming in second place is not an option, but where principle-centered winning is the only approach.
Hello, I'm Hilary Fordwich and welcome to a special edition of Government Contracting Weekly. In the roughly 30 weeks since our inception, we've been overwhelmed by the positive response from so many of you in the government contracting community, from both the government side and the private sector of this critical workspace. We also know that as each week goes by, we continue to grow more viewers. Therefore, we believe this is the perfect time to look back over the past 6 months and show you some interesting moments from Government Contracting Weekly. When we aired our very first show, back on September 16th, we began with an introduction from Jim McCarthy, the owner and technical director of AOC Key Solutions, which is of course the sponsor of Government Contracting Weekly. Jim wanted to share with all of you our vision for this program. Let's take a look at what Jim had to say.
Good morning. My name is Jim McCarthy and I am Principal Owner and Technical Director of Key Solutions. I'd like to welcome you to our new television show, Government Contracting Weekly. This is a show about government contracting, how to win government contracts and how to win them the right way. It is a show for companies that are doing business with the federal government or who would like to do so. It is also a show for government procurement officials who would like to have tips and suggestions on how to bring out the best that industry has to offer. So I'd now like to give you some context about our show. Government contractors do important work in supporting our nation, developing new products from IT to defense to space exploration to cleaning up the environment. Government contractors are the resource base that our government calls on to get things done. Key Solutions specializes in giving government contractors the winning edge during procurements. We know that success depends on offering the government the product or service that best fits its needs. It should be obvious, but often isn't, that a company can only do that if it fully and insightfully understands the government's needs, wants, and biases. That, of course, means that meaningful dialogue must take place between the parties. Government Contracting Weekly is designed to foster that dialogue. We cannot deal in depth with every government need and every contractor's approach, but we can prime the pump and get the dialogue started. We will also apply experience and lessons learned from our 30 years of winning work from the federal government for our clients. We'll provide tips and insight in how companies can be more successful in this highly competitive marketplace. Throughout the season, we welcome and actively solicit your input. Please visit our website, governmentcontractingweekly.com, to comment on our show segments and to suggest other topics or other speakers that you would like to see. In a minute, I will turn you over to the face of Government Contracting Weekly, Hilary Fordwich. Hilary is the perfect choice to host this show, as she has over a decade at KPMG where she headed global business development. And she has an extensive background in television broadcasting. Thank you for watching. I hope you'll make our program a normal part of your Sunday morning routine. Now, Hilary, over to you.
Clearly, we are all working in one of the most challenging periods that many of us have ever experienced. It can also be said, though, that the government contracting community has been through many cyclical downturns. From this, we know that what often separates the winners from the losers is pure leadership at the top of the organization. Two of the many outstanding leaders who have already appeared on our program are Todd Stottlemyre, the CEO of Essentia, and Kevin Madden, the Vice President and General Manager of Honeywell Federal Systems Group. I asked each of them to share their own perspective on leadership. Todd, you've been with Essentia just over a year and a half, about 20 months or so. So in the time you've been there, what have you aimed to do as a leader and where are you taking Essentia in the future?
Well, first and foremost, to build the best leadership team that I can possibly build at the company. And so I focus a lot of my time on really talent acquisition and talent evaluation to make sure that we have outstanding leaders at our company, people who are passionate about what we do, people who are passionate about Essentia, people who care deeply about our customers and practice day in and day out what we call the Essentia way, which is all about excellence, it's all about commitment, it's all about integrity, it's about innovation for our customers. And so there's no substitute for leadership, and I focus very hard to make sure that we have the right leadership. And I think that's even more important in the times that we face today, these very difficult times where employees are uncertain about the future. They're uncertain about the company's future or a company's future.
Everything.
They're uncertain about the economy, they're uncertain about their own jobs, so there's no substitute for leadership. So we work very hard to make sure we have the best leadership team.
So what is most important today in a leader versus maybe a decade ago?
I don't think a lot has changed in terms of the core leadership side, but I think it's a matter of balance. And so when I look at leadership, you look through certain things. It can't be a flash in the pan. It can't be a one-hit wonder. It can't be tagged to one particular area. I look for balance. I look for balance in faith. I look for balance in family. I believe very strongly that if you're upset on the family side, you can't carry.
That's Maslow's hierarchy.
You can't do a good job.
You're not functioning.
You're not functioning at all.
Yes.
And then secondly, from that standpoint, then you balance career with personal interest. You take that back, drives courage in terms of taking a stand, playing the game on the balls of your feet, as opposed to playing on your heels. And then I would say I look at players who have been knocked in the dirt. Somewhere along their line, they have tasted defeat.
And they've got up again, though, importantly.
It's okay to lose, but don't ever quit. And I want to see that mentality when I look at a leader.
What was it Roosevelt talked about, being in the arena? It's he who has been in the arena.
Yeah, that's when you look at like a John Harbaugh. I love to study coaches. So John Wooden, John Harbaugh, up the street here, you love to listen to how they motivate and inspire people. And you have to adapt to the times. But again, I believe there's a core trait to leadership. And I believe it's with your faith, your family, which is number one. And then secondly, then you take that down to career interest and personal interest. Courage, and then again, get knocked down, get right back up.
A common question we all ask is whether the chasm between the government and private sector is widening or improving. Earlier this year, I asked Elliott Branch, the Senior Procurement Executive for the US Navy and a board member at NCMA, and Susan Zeleniak, Senior Vice President, Public Sector Markets for Verizon Federal, the same question. Elliott, many of our viewers may recall we've actually had an entire program specifically on bridging the chasm. We've had different views on. From your perspective, and you've been on the government side for many years now, do you think that chasm is widening or is it getting narrower? And what are the reasons?
Well, I really don't believe that there is a chasm.
You don't? Wow.
No, I don't. So what I believe happens is what happens in almost any economic transaction where two parties are involved. There is a continuum search for equilibrium. And there are times when we get out of equilibrium and we swing back into equilibrium. And I think we're simply going through one of those adjustments. And I think one of those adjustments is driven by the fact that we aren't going to have the dollars that we have. And
it's creating friction.
Well, it's certainly creating, it may be creating friction, but I think it's a healthy friction.
It is.
Because what it does for us is it causes us to look at our needs and look at them very, very critically, and to have a conversation inside the Navy about what we value. And what that's going to cause is that's going to cause industry to have to react to those things. And as the things we value change, to change their business models. And change is hard for both parties. Change is hard for industry, and change is hard for us. So one could see that as a moving apart, the relationship, the government and industry. I would argue that what it's really about is seeking a new equilibrium.
Susan, our viewers know that we've talked about quite a few times the bridging the chasm between government and industry. This is an issue that's been contentious for many years, and we've had some guests on that have said that they feel that the chasm is closing, others that think that it isn't. What's your view on the chasm, and can you think of specific examples as to how the chasm has either broadened or narrowed?
So I've been doing this a long time. And I go back to my experience with the government and the way we bought things then and the way that some of the procurement activity we're seeing. One of the things I definitely see where I would say the chasm is closing is there's a lot more interaction before a major procurement hits the street. Dialogue,
communication we hear.
Right. That, even allowing companies to come in and do presentations about how they think it should work. GSA, for example, thinking about the next networks contract had vendors in, and not just the current vendors, but others come in and talk about how that contract might look in its next transformation.
So it's the shaping, not the government doing it independently, but more collaboratively.
Absolutely, and we've seen that in many, that's one example, but we've seen it in many cases. And I think especially as they're looking to buy new services like cloud, they really are very interested and have allowed vendors to have good open dialogue prior to the release of any procurement.
Healthcare IT is growing at a time when so many other sectors are contracting and struggling to hold their own. Still, there are lessons to be learned here for all of us. In early February, I spoke with Cheryl Campbell, Senior Vice President, Health and Compliance Programs for CGI Federal, and I asked her, what is at the center of their success? So the healthcare market in general, Cheryl, has been growing, and I know that you've been responsible for great growth in the last 3 years, and it's actually beneficial for the whole of the United States. It's not just veterans, it's on the commercial side. Can you expand about what is that commitment and how is it better, how is it growing, particularly from the CGI perspective?
Absolutely. So a couple of aspects. One, CGI being a federal contractor, so one of our primary clients is Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. So obviously CMS is at the forefront of really sort of the transformation that's happening in healthcare through the Federal Insurance Exchange. CGI is the contractor on point to help implement Federal Insurance Exchange as we go forward. But you know, for us, we really look for opportunities to help our clients take cost out of the system.
Because that's good for everybody.
It is absolutely good for all of us. And so, you know, what we practice is really sort of thinking about ways of, through innovation, through targeted solutions to really sort of help reduce costs for our clients. So yes, it's a great growing market, but we need to do it responsibly.
Yes.
And so we do it in a way to make sure that we're as a partner to our client versus being there as just as an agent to the client.
Wonderful. It's clear that the migration to the cloud will be an area of innovation and growth for years to come. Given the tremendous impact the cloud will have on so many of our businesses and agencies, I wanted to ask Alan Weakley, the president of the defense group at CSC, what are the trends that are emerging in this red-hot area? Alan, there's been a great amount of conversation and dialogue around and demand for migrating services to the cloud, migrating information to the cloud. What are you seeing, though, specifically in terms of that definition? And for our audience, what do you see are the trends around migration?
Well, it's clear that there's a high demand for the cloud within the government. There are early adopters. There are agencies like the FAA and the intelligence community that are looking for opportunities to have clouds of their own. There are other agencies like the DoD that are taking a little bit more methodical approach, that are taking a little bit a longer view on that. And what we're finding is that there are typically agencies that are ready to buy their own cloud, a private cloud. There are agencies that are more interested in taking what they've had and looking at a hybrid approach to cloud. And then there are finally agencies that are moving right out into the public cloud, which obviously means that the security requirements are a bit different. We look at each and every one of those opportunities. We have a solution for each one of those, and it really begins with a cloud assessment with our clients.
Whether you're in a government agency or anywhere in the spectrum of government contracting, we're all focused on understanding, serving, and benefiting from the acquisition process. Late last year, I asked Bill McNally, the Deputy Administrator in the Office of Procurement for NASA, what opportunities should our viewers be most aware of? The budget you have at NASA is about $17 billion, and I believe about 80% of that is funneled through your procurement process. Are there specific opportunities you can mention to our audience that they should be aware of within that process?
Yes. First of all, the one area for small business, our goal there has increased in this fiscal year by 2 points.
It has.
Yeah,
it's good news. Yeah.
So we actually met our goal last year, even though the official numbers aren't out. But we're looking to increase that even more. And again, like I mentioned earlier, we post our acquisitions
on our
website. Yeah. We encourage industry to go visit. And one of the things I really have been proud of is that companies have gone out and won business where they traditionally have never gone and won work
at a particular center.
Because they had the technology, they had the track record you could believe in.
Track record, they come in
deliver.
with new ideas of how to do the work, and they come in with a better price.
So something creative, and they're hungry, and they're competitive.
Right, and so what we try to do is take advantage of the competitive process to meet our needs, but also to try to get it at a lower price.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
The overriding mission of this program is to help you, the government contractor, win or retain business. So we couldn't call an episode The Best of Government Contracting Weekly without asking some very smart leaders what are their keys to winning. 3 very actionable answers came from Steve Gaffney, the chairman, CEO, and president of Dine International, Tom Harvey, the senior vice president of AT&T Government Solutions, and just recently, Greg Baroni, the chairman and CEO of Attain. Let's see what you can take away from their great answers.
Steve, you have had a lot of wins recently, and as I've heard you say that those are based a lot on the values. You're very strong on the right kind of values, the right kind of people, how you treat your people at DynCorp. You've won, I know, with NASA and Army and Air Force, etc. Do you want to address what you see as some of the keys to those wins? Are they the values, and what is it about the values for our audience when they're looking at building their companies and winning too? What should they look to do?
Yeah, that's a great question. And throughout my entire career, I've tried to spend more time on the front end, where there's actually more ambiguity in the process, than probably on the back end, where there's much more tactical things needed to do. And it all comes down to literally building a team that actually is able to confront the realities of the marketplace on a recurring basis in order to figure out ways to win. And so what I've decided to do is I would rather spend my time every Friday talking about new business. So I get my top leaders in a room every Friday where we actually go line by line through all the opportunities, both near term and long term, trying to figure out what does it take to win? Why do we think we can win? What are the competitors doing? What are they not doing so well? What strategic things do we need to have in place in order to take advantage of an adjacent market?
Earlier I talked a little bit about mobile security,
yes,
right? And the importance of providing an end-to-end secure mobile experience for the government. Well, recently we were awarded a contract with an agency where we worked with that agency to develop a secure handset, a handset that is capable of providing Type 1 encryption, protecting data at rest, and encrypting in transit. And I think that we worked very closely with this agency. We brought in partners, right? And at the end of the day, we provided a solution that met the needs of this particular agency. And now we are rolling out multiple devices.
So really you're practicing what you preached about listening to the customer, getting very specific, drilling down into a unique app that they wanted and the security they wanted and needed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. What are your keys to winning? What are you doing at Attain?
So let me kind of break this into 2 elements here. One is the long view, which is a built-to-last philosophy that builds on a core ideology that says, here's our mission in life, here are our core values, in other words, how we will behave and get that purpose accomplished. And then at the same time, it's this relentless drive toward progress around innovation, around improvement, around change and renewal, and putting programs in place that, in one sense, preserve that culture of intention, meaning that ideology that you have, at the same time, programs that really move you forward, move your people forward, and you invest in this, what I call organic capability, in terms of your people, in terms of the things that you do, everything ranging from sales and business development and capture and proposal development, like you mentioned, all the way through to the people development in terms of tangible skills that they have, and then softer skills in the form of leadership capability. So it's putting that long view in place. And then you couple that with this focus on, in what I really think is an important thing, around your competency. What is it that sets you apart? Your core competency. What sets you apart from everybody else?
Your big differentiators.
Yes.
Yeah.
And making sure that you invest in that and develop it even further. And then there are tactical considerations. The shorter term view is what markets, what fast moving streams should I capitalize on? but what? Aligned with your core competencies, right? And the markets that you already have intimate relationships with. So it's all of that combined that you kind of take into consideration as you drive towards success for the long term.
We ended the year with 2 panel discussions. First looking back on 2012 and then looking ahead to 2013. In the retrospective show, I asked Brad Waters, principal in the Government Contractor Services practice of KPMG, and Gary Loyd, CEO of Centurion Research Solutions, to take a look back on what they saw.
Brad, if you look back at 2012, and indeed our entire panel, everybody knows, of course, we had a slump, we had a lot of lack of decision making. Everyone knows sort of those big picture general issues. But from your perspective at KPMG, working with all of your clients, what were you and the other partners seeing?
I think we are impressed that the industry knows how to respond to changing market conditions. 2011 was probably the peak year for revenue, and yet in 2012, at least from the quarterly results, you see margin improvement still, because they have taken steps regarding cost structures, that sort of thing. They're preemptive in their approaches. I would say as well today, it's as much around positioning for a lesser spend environment going forward that they've taken those steps. But by and large, an industry that is effective in addressing wherever the government wants to take that industry in terms of the spend level.
Sure. What do you see, Gary?
This is a, it's a historic year. Multi-trillion-dollar budget deficit, and the budget pressures on our government contractors is just monumental right now. And when you look at that, is that going to drive revenues down? It could drive revenues down for our government contractors. That said, though, a lot of the companies that are currently right now in place making changes in their business, they're going to do fine. The changes they've made this year and looking at, well, where can they better compete with GWACs and IDIQs?
Yes.
What key markets can they go penetrate? What acquisitions can they make for, healthcare IT or cybersecurity? Those are all great moves that we see a lot of our government contractors making today.
In the last week of the year, we hosted a panel discussion looking ahead to 2013. In this program, I asked Angela Stiles, a partner and chair of the Government Contracts Group at the law firm of Crowell & Mooring, and Gary Loyd, CEO of Centurion Research Solutions, what some of their predictions are for this year ahead.
2013, Angela, first to you. Are you more optimistic or are you pessimistic than you were when you were going into 2012?
I think I'm less optimistic, but I think people need to remember that we're still spending $600 billion on products and services. There are a lot of federal dollars out there for smart companies still to go after. So it's not pessimistic, I think just a little bit less optimistic.
Than you were before going into 2012. Gary, what do you think? You concur? Or?
Well, I'm not really optimistic, not really pessimistic, more of a realistic view. We had a lot of challenges in 2012, budget uncertainties leading to existing new contracts being canceled or delayed. We're looking at just in January alone, $23 billion worth of contracts expiring for the entire year, $291 billion worth of contracts being expired. I think those companies, though, that focus on presidential strategic initiatives and align themselves accordingly, they're going to do fine.
Angela, in your client base at Crowell & Mooring, what are their keys to winning a government contract?
Two things, I think. Past performance and articulating your past performance well in your proposal. Don't assume, because you're the incumbent, that they know what a good job that you've done. And then the second one is really picking the right partners for your team, people that you can bring to the table that add value and that the government trusts and knows as well.
Oh, great. So if you're the prime, the right kind of sub.
Absolutely.
Yes. Gary, what about you? What do you think are the keys to winning for Centurion
I think
clients?
you got discipline, focus, compelling on, competing on analytics and making fact-based decisions on bidding and no bidding. I think when you look at the 10 factors that influence winning, understanding the customer's problem, that's key. Your customer relationship, is it solid, is it strong? Team, that's very important.
And it goes on, there's so many of them,
on and on. There are 10 factors that absolutely will drive whether you're successful or whether you're going to be unsuccessful.
And you've got to focus on those keys.
Amidst all of the uncertainty we are facing by the lack of progress from our elected officials, we held another panel discussion on the impact this has had in the operations of government agencies and in the private sector. I asked Dan Forman, a partner in the law firm of Crowell & Mooring, and Bill Phillips of KPMG, what they are advising their clients, and then if this is the new normal.
One of the things that we're seeing is, and I think that's really important for companies who are bidding, is to really revisit the way they strategize and attack a particular solicitation. What we're seeing are many procurements where in the past you would expect price not to be the most important consideration and sort of technical quality to be the driving force. We're now seeing a greater emphasis on price. We're seeing procurements that you really would normally expect to see on a cost reimbursement basis now being led on a fixed price basis. So you shift the risk to the contractor. So I think the contractors that are nimble and that are able to adjust their bidding strategies and that are able, frankly, to absorb smaller margins and really focus in on sharpening their pencil are the companies that are going to that will fare better.
In a word, yes, I think it is the new normal. Obviously, the economy grows and expands and it shrinks and contracts. You know, those are the normal, you know, sine waves that you have. But I think that this is where we are now, and I think that for the foreseeable future, as we try to resolve our budget issues that are real, that we are going to go through a protracted period of time in which this is the way things are. Hopefully, we'll have a deal in place so that we know what the new normal is, but it's not the heady days of 5 or 6 years
And we're
ago.
not going to go back to that. Recently, I had the opportunity to sit down with Richard Nathan, the President and CEO of Key Solutions, that, as you know, is the force behind Government Contracting Weekly. We launched 6 months ago, and I asked him about his initial impressions.
6 months ago, this was a noble experiment, but Government Contracting Weekly has caught on, developed a significant audience, and has proven to be a success. I'm extremely pleased by the quality of the guests we've had. They've been high-ranking government and company officials who really have great insights on the market. Because the interviews are relatively short, we only get the most important points, and that makes for good TV and respects our viewers' time. We've heard about all the hot topics of information technology, including cyber, cloud, health IT, big data, and mobile technology. We've discussed the direction of the market and the impacts of sequestration, budget cuts, and LPTA. In fact, 2 of our guests predicted sequestration would happen even when the prevailing opinion was that the government would never allow that to happen. And we spent time addressing the needs and unique challenges of small businesses. All in all, I think it has been a very successful 6 months. Now, looking forward, we'll be following the impact of sequestration and how it ultimately resolves itself, along with the inevitable impacts on government programs and contracts. We'll be discussing new high-profile contract opportunities and advising our viewers about new trends in the direction of contracts and the highly watched emphasis on LPTA. And we'll do all of this in the context of the art and science of winning work with the government and our concept of principle-centered winning. In the end, we'll find that our industry is resilient and will find ways to adapt and thrive in the new environment.
Thank you, Richard. We all recognize the critical work done by our government employees and the contractors that support them. Perhaps this show can make a small contribution to their success. Now to our viewers. Please watch our upcoming shows and see if Richard is right in his predictions. See you next week.
You've been watching Government Contracting Weekly, sponsored each week by AOC Key Solutions Incorporated. Government Contracting Weekly is the only television program devoted exclusively to the competitive and dynamic world of government contracting. For additional information, comments, questions, or suggestions, please write us at governmentcontractingweekly.com.